I'm going to go ahead and dive right in. Because like I said, I know we have a lot, and I know there's a lot of interest and a lot of questions. So thank you all for joining Guiding Bright Minds Ask the Expert series. And we're focusing tonight on parenting meltdowns, how to coach yourself through tough situations. This is a topic that is very meaningful and impactful to me as a parent of a neurodiverse child myself. I know firsthand how hard this journey can be, which is why my husband and I founded Guiding Bright Minds. So good evening, everyone. I'm Tiffany Feingold. As I mentioned, I'm the co-founder of Guiding Bright Minds. Now, before I introduce our wonderful expert panelists here tonight, I want to share a little bit about my journey and my quest for creating an organization and a community that supports parents of neurodiverse children. About 5 years ago, my sweet boy began struggling significantly, specifically in unstructured, loud, chaotic settings, such as daycare, swim lessons, any place that was loud and noisy and overstimulating. And I know a lot of you can relate to that. He was getting kicked out of daycares, and it was just heartbreaking to watch. We were overwhelmed, felt lost, hopeless, unsure where to go, what to do, who to see. And as I'm sure many of you, we spent countless hours researching resources, professionals who can help. And I felt like I was slowly drowning, trying to figure out how to help my son. What do I do? Where do I go? So I was exhausted and didn't know where to turn. And that's when my husband and I decided we need to create a company that is a community and a resource that brings parents, professionals, and educators together to support you and our amazing children. We want you to know that you're not alone. So if you haven't had an opportunity to check out Guiding Bright Minds, let me tell you 3 key factors that we're focused on at this point. First is to connect you with passionate, trusted, and vetted professionals and educators who are dedicated to serving our neurodiverse. Those are the professionals, and you'll get to meet and hear what their expertise are in and how they provide the services. Second, we want to educate you. Guiding Bright Minds focuses on education. What are the various symptoms, the diagnosis, the treatments? What are the events, classes, webinars, articles that are out there? There's so much to learn, and you can go to so many different places. We want to be that one-stop shop that provides that data for you. Last November, we kicked off 2 free webinars a month, and they have had amazing impact. And as I mentioned, we had over 270 registrations for this one. So we know that there's a need for education, and we'd love to get your feedback on that. The last way we want Guiding Bright Minds to help our parents is to unite you with other families. I know it was life-changing for me to meet other people who have neurodiverse children. I love my friends who don't, but they don't understand. So I had to incorporate in my tribe those parents that understand firsthand. So we want to hear from you. We just launched 14 months ago, so there's so much more we want to do. And so let us find out how we can guide, what other tools, what other resources. If you go to our website, guidingbrightminds.com, you can ask a question and you can add comments. So please do that. And through that process, we heard from a lot of parents whose kids don't have friends how sad and heart-wrenching. Connect. I mean, right now it's local to Colorado. I know, as we've seen in the chat, that many of you are from all over, but we wanted to start somewhere to get that connection. In the chat, if you haven't joined Guided Bright Minds, it's free for parents. So I'll put a link on there for you to join, but be sure to check us out, introduce us, yourself to us, and how we can help you on your journey. Now, before I introduce Elizabeth and Dr. Wolff, I want to just say, you know what? As I mentioned, we have a lot of registrations, and thank you. I sent out an email to get questions from you. So thank you for those that were able to complete that form and get us the information of the questions and the concerns and the frustrations that you have. If you didn't have time to complete that form, or you didn't have an opportunity to receive that email, we will have Q&A chat at the end as well. So if you see at the box on the bottom, there's a Q&A for chat. If you could go ahead and put those questions in there, I promise we'll try to get as many as we can. Because we were able to get the questions ahead of time, Elizabeth and Dr. Wolff had an opportunity to incorporate a lot of that into that. So we might not have the exact same circumstances, but we know that our impact, so it's going to be kind of as informational and general approach to this discussion as we can get to, again, help yourselves. So let's dive in to how we can find out to coach ourselves through struggles while also giving ourselves a little bit of grace. So let me first introduce you to Elizabeth Nallenweg. She is a specialized, she has specialized her clinical career in treatment of autism and ADHD for the last 17 years. She has served family as an RBT, a family therapist, a therapist trainer, clinical owner, and currently as the VP of Care Integration for Ascend Behavior Partners, where she is building a specialized mental health and early diagnostics program for children seeking diagnosis and treatment for autism spectrum disorder. Ascend Behavior Partners provides diagnostic services through home-based ABA programs and family therapy services throughout the Denver metro area. They specialize in early intervention and children under kindergarten age to prepare children and families for the transition into school. Elizabeth received her master's in social work at Indiana University in 2014 and served as a field advisor in her social work or school of social work. She's passionate about addressing the dynamic needs of the entire family surrounding children and believes that the longest lasting impact therapy treatment can have is when the entire family's needs are being addressed and supported. So true, so true. Now, on to Dr. Brian Wolff, is the owner and founder of Wolff Child Psychology and currently serves as the Director of Psychological and Behavioral Services. Since 2011, Wolff Child Psychology has become an established Colorado institution, supporting children, teens, and families throughout its comprehensive, high-quality evaluations, effective therapy and behavioral services, and successful educational advocacy for clients. Wolff Child Psychology's team of psychologists and behavioral coaches has consistently been recognized by parents, schools, and healthcare professionals through a science-based, comprehensive understanding of each child's strengths and challenges. Dr. Wolff obtained his doctoral training both as a research fellow at JFK Partners and at the University of Colorado, Denver, and as a lecturer at the University of Denver. His MA and PhD are in child psychology from University of Denver, and he received a BA in psychology and sociology from Yale University. So without further ado, I will turn it over to you, Elizabeth, to kick us off.
Thank you so much, Tiffany. And it's lovely to meet you all. I'm honored to be presenting here tonight. So let me go ahead and share my screen. All right, as Tiffany said, my name is Elizabeth Nallenweg, and I'm with Ascend Behavior Partners. And today we are going to talk about identifying some strategies to better understand, manage, and prepare ourselves for the inevitable meltdowns. I don't know about you guys, but sometimes it feels like my child's behavior can just turn at the drop of a hat. You know, no matter how many times we've been through it, some days it just feels like it comes out of nowhere. So the bad news is that I don't have a magic bullet for you today to resolve problem behavior, but I am pleased to share some tools that you can keep at your disposal. We're going to look at the full anatomy of a meltdown and identify some ways that you can help yourself when you find yourself in a tough spot. And so we're going to do so by breaking down a behavior. And I like to think of behavior as being a 3-act show. So thinking of a meltdown as three acts with three distinct parts. So there is what's happening around your child and internally before the meltdown happens, what's going on once the meltdown occurs, and then what happens after the meltdown is over, both with you, your child, and everyone else in your family. So as I said before, they may feel like they come out of nowhere, but the truth is that meltdowns always have some sort of trigger. They could be due to something going on in the environment, something going on with your child's day, or sometimes it can just be internal, it can be emotional, something that we just don't see coming. So when we approach your child's needs and leverage your power as a parent within each of these distinct phases of a meltdown, we can better prepare ourselves to manage the behavior, no matter how Oscar-worthy their performance may be at times. So I'm wondering if any of us feel that they have any psychic powers or ability to see the future. I can't see your hands, but I'm going to assume none of them have come up. If anybody did, please chat me your Super Bowl picks because I'd love to hear them. So we have the most power and control over a situation before our child gets to that point where their behavior has gone off the cliff. So it may seem crazy to try to imagine predicting our child's behavior, but really the best thing we can do to minimize a major meltdown or a bad situation is by thinking about first your child's patterns. You know your child better than any expert under the sun will ever know them. So it's really important to walk into a situation and ask yourself, has this happened before? Is this a typical triggering event? Maybe you know getting your child to sit down and eat dinner is usually going to lead to some sort of behavior or power struggle. Maybe it's homework, getting their shoes on, leaving in the morning. Start to identify those patterns. And that's going to help you better mentally and emotionally prepare yourself for knowing that there's probably going to be some problems coming up ahead with this task that we're putting down. It's also important to think about your child's behavior and mood. In my years as a behavior technician, I was trained to always enter any new situation and assess what's going on around me, observe how the child seems to be feeling in the moment, and then prepare accordingly. So maybe it's time to get math homework, you're making dinner, your husband's asking for something and he's in the other room, but you notice that your child is already kind of complaining and grumbling. You know you need to get them to your math homework, but you're probably headed for disaster if you just dive right into that task. So think ahead. How's my child feeling right now? What do I need to do to stabilize the situation before we move into that typical triggering event? It's also important to check your environment. You can usually control your physical space more so than what's going on emotionally inside your child's head. Do they tend to throw things when they get upset? If that's the case, I know that before it's time to go to school, I'm probably going to put their backpack by the door, their shoes by the door, and going to make sure there's nothing else they can whip at me on the way out. Pick the items up if you think there's a risk. Maybe there's an item, let's say the iPad is readily available. You know that you need your child to brush their teeth. Out of sight, out of mind. So look around your environment before you're going to place a demand on your child and think to yourself, what can I do to leverage my control over the situation and minimize any sort of risk involved? Thinking ahead of those triggering events is also going to be one of your best tools that you can use. Let's say that it's time to brush their teeth and you know that this is not going to end well. You could use a timer to maybe help them transition in one activity and into the other, or maybe you can think about the things that are going to happen after the difficult task happens. Now, obviously, we're not always going to be able to avoid a meltdown situation, but by thinking about the past, leveraging the tools that are in your toolbox, and making sure to constantly just check in with yourself and your child emotionally, you're going to minimize the impact or the severity of those meltdowns when they occur. So we're getting to the meat of it and everybody's least favorite part, and that is when the meltdown is happening. We can all do our best to plan a picnic, but we can't predict the weather. And sometimes a meltdown is inevitable, no matter how many things we try to do to prevent them from happening. So a couple of things that are really important, I know easier said than done, is to avoid giving feedback in these moments. I know I have a 14-year-old son and his MO is definitely the back talk these days. it takes every ounce of my being not to want to, pick back at him when he starts to say things or try to verbally escalate. But despite, how we may be feeling inside, the less that we give into a situation, the more that we are making sure we're not contributing to the amount of stress that your child is facing in that moment. So right now, when your child has already kind of exploded and reached that point where they're no longer in control of their emotions, we want to avoid things like bargaining, threatening, talking about how they're feeling. Any additional feedback is just going to be another part of stimulus in their environment. So even if we think that the things we're saying are helping to calm our child down, when somebody is experiencing a high amount of stress, any sort of additional stimulus is only going to contribute to those feelings of stress. Your child is likely not processing anything that you're saying when they are at that point. So the best thing to do is just hang back and wait it out. It takes a lot of practice, but model the behavior that you want your child to see in these moments. Your child has decided that, not buying the candy at the checkout is the end of the world, right? But is it? We know it's not the end of the world. We know that our day is going to go on. So I always like to try to focus ahead of the behavior and imagine what I want to have happen after my child has calmed down. By outwardly not reacting or becoming anxious yourself, you are refusing to empower that behavior. One of the most important things I tell parents that I work with is that anxiety feeds anxiety. And so anytime that your child is experiencing anxiety and then we in turn display our own anxiety, all we are doing is confirming, yes, this is a situation where you should be flipping your lid. So doing our best to just focus on how we are feeling, keeping ourselves calm and not adding to the frustrations of the moment. So with that, we can't control or change how our child is feeling once they have kind of gone off that deep end. That's really an internal process where they need to de-escalate. But what we do have control over is focusing on ourselves. So what is in control during a meltdown? You are still in control of yourself. So finding stress management techniques that work for you in the moment are your best way to kind of help you remain in control, manage the behavior, and help your child come through to the other side. So a couple techniques that I personally am a big fan of would be focusing on deep, slow breathing. You notice that when your child is tense, you might feel your chest start to tighten. You might feel your breath start to increase. It's a little more rapid. You may even notice that you're talking in a more escalated, tense tone of voice. Take a step back, take a deep breath, and remember to breathe. Another technique I'm a big fan of is counting. I've been in some pretty severe meltdown situations in my career, and I often try to do things like make a grocery list, think about what I'm going to watch Netflix on later. I can be physically present and monitoring to make sure that the child is safe and not in any harm, but I can also choose to take my mind out of the stress of the situation. We all know that the meltdown is going to come to an end eventually. And so focusing on that end point and getting myself out of that instead of thinking, oh my gosh, everyone's looking at me. This whole grocery store thinks I'm a terrible parent. Just write it out, take care of yourself, and be ready to move on. Think about the times that you've gotten through this before. I imagine that if any of us walk into a meltdown tonight, it's not going to be our first rodeo. You've gotten through this before. Your child's gotten through this before. So remember that things will move on, time will move on, and you will be back in control. Another really big tip is to not take it personally. In my 17 years in this field, I have been called every name in the book, and I mean every name in the book. And I've certainly been on the receiving end of a few good punches. So my takeaway is that your child's meltdown is a symptom of emotional dysregulation or an overreactive stress response to feeling frustrated. And it's rarely, if ever, about you as a person. A lot of the time, we are simply a part of the environment that is giving our child the stress. Your child may be mad about doing the homework, and you may be the recipient of the one telling them to do the homework. But at the end of the day, you're really just a placeholder for all of that stress and frustration. And it really isn't about you. One of my favorite supervisors in the past once told me, behavior is fighting behavior, and it is not about you as a person. And I always try to remember that with my own children. So finally, at last, the meltdown has ended. It didn't last forever, although it may have felt like it, and all things do come to an end. So after that behavior is over, that is our greatest opportunity to take this as a learning moment. That is the time when your child has regained, rationality, and they are back to being calm and receptive and able to process information. This is the time to communicate with your child. Can you verbally process with your child? Do you want to check in, help them assign feelings to what they just expressed? Offer your emotional support if it's necessary, and anything you wanted to say to them before they calm down. Depending on your child's developmental stage, you can consider to reestablish communication. So the time to talk about feelings when they are upset is after they are done being upset. If your child isn't a child that communicates verbally, you can model the words for them. It's also important to remember that communication isn't just about what we say, it's how we say it. It's our body language, it's our facial expressions. Those all signal to your child how you feel. I think that recovery is extremely important for both parents and children after a meltdown has occurred. And so it's really important, even if we may still be feeling anxious or stressed or maybe even angry, to model to our child that I'm with you, I forgive you, and we're ready to move on now that you are calm. Hold your child accountable if it's necessary. If they destroyed something in the course of their meltdown, do they need to help clean it up? Did they hit their sister and need to apologize? Being accountable for their actions helps them to establish that there is a consequence to those impulsive behaviors that we sometimes see. In the moment, impulsive behaviors can occur very quickly, and we don't often associate it to any specific consequence. But by letting your child see that they don't just get to go scot-free after, destroying the living room or ripping up something that didn't belong to them, it's going to eventually, over time, become a pattern, and pretty soon they'll start connecting the pieces to the consequence and my actions when I'm upset. It's also really important to follow through if the trigger involves some sort of instruction or direction. If the whole blow up occurred because your child didn't want to brush his teeth and he went to bed and didn't brush his teeth, it's pretty likely that he's going to try the same techniques again. Now, none of us are perfect, and we're all going to have those nights, and it's important to forgive yourself when you weren't able to follow through. But when you have it in you, when you have the time and energy, I always encourage parents to just follow through with that task so that your child learns there isn't any escape or delay in the thing they wanted to do. A lot of times, meltdowns are simply a way for a child to delay an unpleasant event that they didn't want to have happen. And so by making sure that we pick that back up again, we're showing them we do have to do the things that mom or dad says. And finally, it may sound simple, but it's also important to move on emotionally once they do. I mentioned this earlier, but it is just so important. Your adrenaline is probably very high. You may have hurt feelings. Your child may have said some things that you didn't like or maybe hard for you to stomach. But by signaling to them that you forgive them and that you are there to support them, you are again modeling control and appropriate responses to those behaviors. So before I kick things over to Dr. Brian, I also wanted to share that I breezed through a lot of really hopefully valuable talking points tonight. But Tiffany will be following up with some handouts that I created. I made some little flashcards, and they're little tips for you to keep with you. I recommend that you cut them out, put them on a key ring, and maybe keep them in your back pocket or your purse or the car or wherever you need that little extra help. So thank you for your time. And as we've just covered all of these strategies and we're hopefully ready to manage meltdowns and set ourselves up for success, I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Brian Wolff, and he will be discussing some strategies to support yourself as the parent during those meltdowns. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. That was extremely helpful information on kind of how to, like you said, sort of break down the process of what a meltdown is and sort of how to think about each stage of it from pre, during, and post. And it's a great segue to the kind of things that I want to talk about. I guess one, big backdrop is the way I like to think about talks like this is it's sort of like getting like like going to a new gym and getting the tour of the facility, and you see what the machines are and you get a sense of when the class schedule is. And sometimes that's enough. Sometimes you need a personal trainer, right? It depends on your situation. And, that's where therapists and behavioral specialists and other people can come in, to help you out to kind of get through some of these really, helpful and interesting bullet points. And the same will be exactly true for what I'm going to talk about in my presentation. So if anybody, wants to talk further about these kinds of things, I make myself available to all parents who call to think through what could be, most helpful. So let me pull up my slides here. First, I have to share screen. Then I go here. Go somewhere. Hang on a second. Yep. Okay. So, and this is visible, Tiffany and Elizabeth, correct? Okay, great. All right. And so, my portion is going to, a little bit more about the sort of, parent side of this and ways that, we would think through in our, behavioral specialist work and our therapy work, how to really kind of take parents through all the different things that go into parenting. So I think sometimes, and I'm a parent of 2 boys and, who have all sorts of behaviors and meltdowns and all sorts of things. And I'm always having to think through, what is this about? Kind of what's going on here so that I have a better kind of overall conceptualization of meltdowns and my own responses to them and so forth. But again, sort of sometimes getting that professional direction, support and handholding, it really kind of makes the difference here. So a couple of things, I think of like before the meltdown, and I don't just mean right before meltdown occurs, but in general, when we're parents, we may think we're just sort of giving instructions or being nurturing or supporting with homework, and we are, but we're always sort of thinking, right, consciously, subconsciously, along a few different dimensions that are just really important to maybe bring to your consciousness a little bit. So one is this idea of, when am I being sort of structured and consistent with my expectations? When am I being flexible, right? And we all know that, sometimes you could be in the mindset that structure and consistency is going to lead to the best outcomes, and it's predictable and it's safe feeling for kids. And of course, that's true. And if we do too much of that, then we get to that level of, are we being rigid parents? Are we not listening? Are we not validating, and so forth? So that's kind of one side of the equation. Now, on the other, we might be thinking, man, we're going to be models of flexibility. It's going to rain outside and it's going to ruin our picnic. So we're just going to show how it rolls off our back and we switch to an indoor picnic. But when we go too much on the flexible side, then the rules start to melt down. The rules start to dissipate, or they become less clear, and kids start to, kind of try to understand, well, where are my parents at? What happens if I do X? Does Y still happen, or is it Z now, or is it unclear? And so this is kind of one dimension that, when we're thinking about our parenting, that we probably, need to have some meta understanding of it, that we're making decisions along this dimensions here. Another dimension that we think of for parenting is, when are we sort of supporting kids' independence, or development of independent life skills, coping skills, and so forth. And on the other side, when are we sort of accommodating, right? If kids have fears or anxiety or resistance to things, when are we, kind of letting things go? And again, there's no right or wrong here. It's just another dimension of parenting. So, for example, if we're supporting independence, that could be a great thing. We're teaching them to get their own homework out, complete it, and check back. Or we're teaching them to do a morning routine through checklists or whatever it is to get teeth brushing, hair brushing, and so forth done. But if that becomes too extreme and they're saying, actually, hey, in words or not words, hey, I need help with this, I can't adequately comb my hair, and we're just saying, nope, that's the independence that we're teaching it to, we maybe have a mismatch, right, between what their abilities are and what we're really trying to promote independence for. And on the other side, when we're accommodating things, so kids are anxious, kids are resistant to what we're asking, there's a time and a place where we say, we hear you. This is really stressful. In fact, it's so stressful, maybe we're not going to do this exact thing right now, or we're going to make a plan to do it more in the future. So there could be a really good level of sort of recognizing and sort of adjusting to and accommodating to the things that they're showing us emotionally. And then, of course, there's caving, right, which Elizabeth was talking about. We don't really want to do that so much, where, we have a reasonable expectation. They're showing us that they don't want to do it. We're like, never mind, forget it. Or the tantrum happens and we don't get back to the toothbrushing. Then we're really reasonably going to predict the problem will happen again the next night. So again, like, there's some level of accommodating to what our kids and adjusting to their needs. But when we go too far along that dimension, we run the risk of being permissive and caving and promoting the very behavior we're trying to not have. Another dimension to think about as parents, and again, this is great fodder for professional, support, right? To think about things along these lines. So logic-based versus emotion-based kind of parenting strategies. And this can mean a lot of things, but what I'm meaning by this is there are times when we are problem solving with kids. My kid lost his backpack. Okay, where did we look? Did we go to the lost and found? Let's retrace our steps. And emotions may be hyping up, but in our mind right now, coming back to the logic is going to be helpful because maybe we can find that darn backpack and get out of this problem, right? And some of that, of course, is very effective. Where it becomes less effective is when our approach becomes sort of predominantly verbal logic based, because there's times where kids just need to cry that they lost their backpack. Kids need to learn how it feels, and it's okay that these negative things happen and then we can't necessarily solve all problems, right? There are learning opportunities to be had there. So if we're overly logic based in our parenting, we might be missing opportunities to teach emotion regulation and tolerance for negative emotions. On the flip side, if we're very sort of focused on, well, how are you feeling right now? But not even with the words, just sitting with feelings, being with them, any of them, sadness, anger, disgust. Of course, that could be wonderful parenting too. But if you do too much of that, then you may be missing opportunities to just have a calm time where like, yeah, I know we can find that backpack. It's right over here. And we don't even have to do, maybe there's some simple solutions at times that can help us, save our emotion-based parenting for other opportunities when we really don't have control over the situation and we really do have to learn. Now, again, when we balance and when we do these things, I think we all just do kind of as it feels right. And often that's great. And then sometimes when we're having a higher level intensity of tantrums going on, it helps to take a step back and think where you and or your partner or both are on these different dimensions in different situations and in general. And then, finally, this idea like for ourselves as parents, when do we seek to change what we're doing? And it's kind of a segue from what I was just saying, versus accept who we are and how we're parenting and where we came from as parents, right? So I wouldn't really be in business if I didn't think there was opportunities for change, right? Like therapists work with parents to change the dynamics of things so that everybody's sort of happier or has more tolerance for distress or any number of goals. So seeking change is a very reasonable thing. But if we're sort of constantly in that, I would almost say like a shame spiral, that spiral of like, I can't do anything right as a parent. My kid can't seem to do anything right as a student. And kind of just like, I'm, getting really stuck in that regard, like that could be negative too. So you kind of, but on the same side, you also want to think about where do I accept who I am? Like, can I ever at some point let go of the fact that, yeah, I'm not a perfect parent and I'm going to do some things that are right, that really help situations. I'm going to do some things that are going to exacerbate situations. And how do I take that step back and make sure I am giving myself grace and I'm repairing with my kids when things kind of go a little bit haywire. And that's where this concept of the title of the whole presentation, like parenting meltdowns, right? That this wasn't really a talk about children's meltdowns. This was a talk about parenting meltdowns. And that's important because we do all meltdown, whether we show it in sort of very big terms or it's happening internally or it's just sort of a persistent self-doubt as a parent. All of these things I would sort of encapsulate in that concept of ourselves as parents sort of getting sort of hurt in this process. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how can we sort of help ourselves with that a little bit. So that's kind of all like just things to think about as parents, right? Lots to think about. And again, most of the time we're just acting naturally as parents and usually it's fine. But if we're having more and more difficulties, these are the things that we might want to make more conscious. So then like Elizabeth spent a lot of her talk on like during the meltdown, parenting really is about patience, right? Not easy to come by in those moments. I like to think of physiological stress reactivity as a dual process. Kids go up, we go up, kids go down, we go down. There's lots and lots of research to show this. This probably happens in a very adaptive way so we understand our kid, right? They're upset, so we're upset. We kind of feel it. If we can take that as a cue rather than as a fighting point, we could actually probably do pretty well. We're understanding their experience more because we're experiencing it ourselves. And sometimes that thought alone actually helps me be just 10% more patient in some of these circumstances. We have to remember that when kids are having true meltdowns and they're looking really aggressively upset, they're looking really panicked and scared, they're having fight or flight responses of some form. It's not a joke. They're not doing it just to be manipulative. They're really experiencing some emotional dysregulation that is akin to having a panic response or having a big, aggressive response to a stimuli. So we have to remember that's kind of what's happening for them. And when we have our meltdowns, the same thing for us. if we measured our heart rates and so forth, which you can do in therapy, you can see how much we kind of elevate when we're having these experiences. And really, I say the best and slash really the only thing to do to be as effective as possible is to find some way to take care of our own emotions, behaviors, because it's a two-way street. Kids go up, we go down, kids start to come down. They may be slower because their physiological stress systems are not as fine-tuned as ours, and that doesn't even happen well into sort of young adulthood. But if we do come down, they will follow, right? There was a note in the comments earlier, like I try to do that and the kids keep pushing the envelope. At some point that stops. It's hard. Nobody wants to wait that long. Usually we just get big and scary and stop the thing. But if and you get some professional support, if we can hang lower as much as we can, kids will eventually sort of find their way down again, just like Elizabeth had talked about. Common strategies that, again, were sort of mentioned already is like tag teaming with another parent, separating yourself from the situation or the child. Certainly as much as possible when kids are in reptilian brain, panic mode, fight or flight mode, words are not going to be effective. Words are way up here in the front. Emotional regulation stuff's way in the back. They don't really connect very well, not at that stage of meltdown. And in fact, if you can model some of those nonverbal coping skills without even naming them, you don't have to do that. I'm going to take 5 breaths right now. And they're like, shut up. You just sort of do it and you kind of maintain that nonverbal behavior. Again, it will get picked up on, not in the time frame you want, but it will. Now, remember, your emotional reaction is telling you exactly how the child feels in that moment. So if you could take that as a cue or a clue to what's happening in your family at that moment, maybe you can look for those learning opportunities, just maybe. And then I put this in every time I ever talk to any parent. Give yourself grace when you screw up. I say it just like that, with a smiley face or a sad face or an angry face. Doesn't really matter. But we're all gonna quote much screw up. And things are gonna happen. We're gonna yell. We're gonna model things poorly. We're gonna take things personally and lay it on the kid. And none of that's great, but none of that's gonna kill them either. And if we give ourselves some grace, we can find the opportunities for repair and do-overs and things of that sort. So after the meltdown, parenting is grace and repair, right? Give yourself grace for your actions. Nobody's a perfect parent. Your partner's not a perfect parent. It's just life's going to intervene. And it's sort of in the broadest scheme of things, kind of okay for kids to see that there's a lot of variety out there. If you react to sort of in the exact best way all the time as parents, what's going to happen when their friend at 15 calls them all sorts of names and kind of switches on them? Like they're going to have like no experience of that, right? So it's okay if things are a little bit messy, as long as in general you find that time to repair with your kid, and end the day on a positive note. Most meltdowns happen like 5 to 7 p.m. Or first thing in the morning. Like usually by the time, especially depending on the age, you can get to that point where you're reading with your kid or watching a show or doing something, playing an Uno game or something. You can probably find a way to find your way back. On the broadest sense of things, like owning where you could have been maybe more nurturing or supportive or validating, or maintain your lines. And again, that you could do some of that self-reflection. Some of that's really best done with a professional to think ahead to the next times these things are going to come up. But I wouldn't dwell on this third bullet point too long. Again, it's just something to maybe think about more broadly. And then finding time in general for the things that we all know are helpful, that give us those resources we need: the self-care, exercise, sleep, connecting with your partner, all the things that are very hard to get in this very busy world that we have and busy lives that we have. But those things really do provide those reserves for you. So when you're in these moments with your kids, you have more of that ability to kind of be neutral, take a step back, recognize what's happening. So that's, kind of the information that I have. And I'm, really looking forward to the part where we're going to answer some Q&A and do some of that piece, but that's what I got.
Thank you so much, Brian and Elizabeth. I really, really appreciate it. As you've seen, a lot of questions that had previously come in. One of the common themes that we saw and want to address is siblings, families that have multiple kids, where you are managing so many different things at one time. And if the meltdowns get too out of hand, here's this situation, there's other kids, and especially depending on the age of the other kids, they might be too little, they can't, be on their own. How do you guys suggest, how can parents really handle the multiple things going on to control the situation? And well, I'll stop it there, but how do they help with that situation?
Elizabeth, you want to start?
Sure, sure. Well, I always want to be clear, you know, if you find yourself routinely dealing with situations where you feel that you or your other children are not safe, please seek out, you know, that more individualized support from a professional. But in general, you know, removing the audience anytime that you can. So, you know, sending other children to other parts of the house. I've worked with a lot of families where we've even created little like boxes that we gave to siblings. Hey, and you know, being honest, I think a lot of times, you know, we try to reassure kids, oh, this is fine, everything's fine. Well, clearly it's not fine. There's stuff going everywhere. So, you know, listen, your brother is struggling right now and he needs me to help him calm down. Why don't you take this toy and go to your room, and then I will come when we're all done. You know, if you have a child who can't be supervised, you know, just trying to orient yourself and your child physically away, you know, whether you need to kind of stand, pivot, you need to block a doorway, whatever you need to do to kind of create like that physical barrier, but doing so in a very minimal way where you're not causing that, you know, alarm to your other children, and then talking about it to them afterward. You know, how did you feel when that happened? You know, just go, oh, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's great. One of the, you know, tricks of the trade that the behavioral specialist who works for our practice taught us a long time ago is, and it's a little easier said than done, but the power of it can be pretty solid, is really giving lots of positive attention to the kid who's not having a problem, right? And it's not to shame the kid having a problem. It's not to, you know, it's really just to show in a very like, in very calm, you know, ways to play with the other kid, or just sort of, you know, even to highlight how much he's doing well and the other kid isn't, just to divert physically that eye gaze, that interactive attention as much as possible to that other kid. I know half the parents in the forum as well, and the kid having a problem is going to start to interrupt that and get in the way. And yes, they probably are. And there's no one exact solution to this problem, but it's one other tool in your toolbox is to really start to direct your gaze, your attention, your positive energy toward the other kid, if you can, when there's siblings around. It can make a very powerful difference. So that's just another thought I had.
Something that I think I've seen pop up in the chat in the Q&A a lot that relates to this is, you know, well, what do I do when what I'm doing is causing my child's behavior to get worse? As counterintuitive as it sounds, think about if you are making spaghetti and you have your burner on low. It's not boiling, right? The noodles aren't getting cooked. So what do? You crank the heat up, and our kids do the same thing with their behavior. So if they're not getting the desired reaction or response from us, they're going to increase. And in my field, we call that an extinction burst, meaning behaviors go all the way up before they go back down. And so in a strange way, when you notice that these techniques are causing your child's, you know, they're mouthing off more, they're getting louder, angrier, that's actually a sign that they're turning that corner. They're going to kind of increase, and then they're going to say, well, this didn't get me anywhere. I'm going to do something else. So that's actually a sign that you're being effective in managing that behavior.
Thank you. Thank you guys. Appreciate that. I do like, you know, one of the questions, you know, do children tend to remember what happens in the moment, things that were said by themselves or the adult? Such a great question.
Yeah, I wonder that one often myself. I think less than we feel in those moments, right? I think that some of the things that are said, and you can think about this in just anything, things you say when you're really upset, you know, you may later reflect you didn't really mean it, or you may even not, you know, things just sort of fly out. And I think for kids, you know, fight or flight systems are pretty blunt, right? They're on and they're kind of off sometimes. And so when they're on, yeah, like it doesn't stick as much. You know, I've had, you know, my kid tell me all sorts of negative things, you know, about who I am as a parent or a psychologist. You know, a lot of comments fly my way, and you remember them. I mean, he may in some very, you know, on some level, but I think for the most part, when we get to the point of repair and connection and kind of reform the memories of the day at the end of the day, I think a lot of that kind of goes away. That, you know, yeah, and same for the things we may let fly as parents. Like, you know, sometimes some of those little comments, you know, that we make that are said in anger, they do stand out. Kids do remember these things, but they also remember when we're repairing and connecting and all the times that we've modeled calmness and so forth. So it's a balance.
And I think you might have mentioned too, because looking at that and talking to many parents, as we're going through this, and there is times where we do obviously have those meltdowns. And is there a point, when you're talking to your child, to let them know, like, hey, that wasn't okay for how I reacted as well. Like kind of walking through that, taking that ownership to say, that's not okay, but you know what? We all have those situations and point in time in which we break, and to walk through that, and that's what I've heard continuously, and even from my own personal experience.
Absolutely. Especially for those of you who are asking about, school age kids and even teens, I think it's absolutely appropriate to kind of have a postmortem, if you will, on behaviors, So let's talk about how you were feeling. Now let's talk about what you did, what happened with those feelings. Well, then what happened after? How did you feel after? How do you think I felt after? And I'm going to tell you how I felt after. So it's a tool called social behavior mapping. If you Google it, there's some really neat little like handouts you can print out and even go through them with your child, but really just helping them again connect that my feelings are connected to the actions, which are connected to consequences.
Yeah, no, it's spot on. I think, it's absolutely appropriate to show. When I was talking about kind of consistency versus flexibility, part of me as a parent, certainly, if I say something and then later I'm like, oh, that wasn't probably the best thing to say, part of me doesn't want to back down, right? It's sort of like, well, I said it and I'm the parent and that's kind of it. But that would be a great chance to be flexible, right? That'd be a great chance if you could even think in the moment, say, oh, hold on, we're all letting things fly here. Let's like do this whole thing over again, right? You can kind of do it at that level. You could certainly do it at the level of later of like that postmortem analysis and say, yeah, talk about the sequence of emotions that occur that, and then sometimes when I do get frustrated, I say the wrong thing or things fly or I say a hurtful thing and, I didn't mean it and I love you very much. And that's just part of kind of the human body, right? Fight or flight, again, is a big response that's very hard to just sort of control, right? And for anybody, if you ever think about yourself being in a panic attack or being mad at the driver next to you or being mad at your boss or colleague or kid, like these are big things that are hard to contain. And so, sometimes with our most loved people, that's when we're going to let the thing out. We probably don't do it at work as much. We have so much social constraint, but at home we have less of it. And it's not a bad thing. It's part of being a human and learning in relationships.
Well, and I think too, that vulnerability and allowing the kids to see that, how did that feel when I had my meltdown? Because we all know that, the whole going back to if your child bites somebody, maybe you should bite your child so they feel, not suggesting that, and I'm not promoting that, but I'm just, kids don't comprehend like, oh, did that hurt or did that do that? And seeing that and saying like, how did that make you feel when mommy or daddy yelled and this happened and this happened? And then they're like, and like, that's how we feel too, just I don't know. And I'm not saying, but I just know that realization and that connection that might be like, oh, is that what I look like? I don't know.
There's, as kids and parents allow themselves to just be open about these things happen, feeling, and again, connecting its feelings, its thoughts, like these are human experiences. And, some kids, when the situation is done, they're not talking about it, right? And so some of that's just that repair. It could just be simple repair mechanisms, being close to kids and so forth. So, and I think there was a question there in the Q&A about, when kids sort of just shut down and don't describe why they're upset and so forth. And I would say that's extremely common. You may get a lot of comments about being upset from some kids in the moment. Other kids just get very, very silent. And, I don't know if the main goal is to get them to open up all the time or not. A lot of it's just to create a sense of safety, create a sense that you're there. If they want to open up, you're available. Like there's a lot of that goes on in parenting too, especially as kids get even older into teen years. Like a lot of that, I'm here for you. I'm not going to make you talk right now, but I'm here when you're ready. Like that's pretty powerful in of itself. If you don't, even if you get immediate responses from your kids on that.
Yeah, if I can add to that, a lot of neurodiverse people, particularly young children, really struggle with the ability to identify and appropriately express emotions. And so I would say that there's a learning opportunity outside of those moments. So in times when your child is communicative and calm, label their emotions. I like to pair, emotion words to things I see happening. So if your daughter's laughing, oh, you're laughing, so you're having fun. You look like you're feeling happy. Or, you hear her sigh heavily, and oh, when we go like that, it makes me feel like maybe you're frustrated. And so help give her those tools outside of those moments where she is upset so that she can make those connections in the future. It's definitely not perfect. I've got one of each. I've got my talker, and I've got my shut the door in my face child. So it can definitely be a struggle. I also see another question here about dealing with a 14-year-old that gets
just looking at that one too.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're living my life. I have a 14-year-old myself. And so a lot of times those types of behaviors can sometimes be about control. I know in particular, my 14-year-old does not appreciate constructive feedback. And then when he feels embarrassed, it turns to come out as, rudeness. And so, as I said earlier, I wouldn't take that personally. But just letting him know he's old enough to kind of understand, hey, when you talk like that to people, even if that wasn't your intention, this is how it made me feel. Sometimes they kind of have to learn those lessons on their own, but at least, again, pairing how they present themselves to how it makes others feel is always very important.
Yeah, I very much same thought process, and Elizabeth has hammered home on this the entire night, like not taking things personally, not reacting in these moments of emotional meltdown. In part because of her own tendency to react personally, right? That's a very human experience, not a pathology. Like someone's you get the sense there's threat in your environment, you're probably going to respond with sort of like the behavior of getting bigger. That's just adaptive in most physical settings where you might be being attacked. But in these situations where there are like 7-year-olds or 9-year-olds or 12-year-olds, it's, we have to kind of override that circuit, right? And that's really, really hard. I would say another thing is very easy and natural for us to think about how much we want to teach our kids about respect and not talking back. And I learned a long time ago, this is personal, but in my professional development, that the kind of lectures that we give, the kind of life lessons we're trying to impart through a lot of words, a lot of that is kind of goes in one ear out the other, is not always heard, and we have to learn to be sometimes more strategic about it. And sometimes ignoring is the name of the game. If my 11-year-old were kind of really talking rude and I'm not at my best self, right, I do a lot of ignoring. I say, hey, I'm going to ignore you right now. This isn't getting us anywhere, and I'm not going to change my stance on this. So that's just what's about to happen here. And then you ignore, and they say, don't ignore me, talk to me. Why don't you talk to me? And at some point they give up, right? And they're learning that rudeness, that approach means something to you, and you're going to have a response to it. And sometimes I just I can ride out the ignoring train pretty well. It actually helps me with my emotions too, because I know what I'm doing. I'm planfully ignoring right now. And maybe that means I go upstairs or go to another space, or I try to divert the topic, but I'm certainly not going to engage in it.
One of the things, a common theme too, just to add in, and it was just posted up here, is, just the power struggle. I mean, the last two hard, just society in general, and just the exhaustion, and how do we find the strength? I mean, when it is a constant battle, and the three of us actually talked about this before too, is preparing ourselves as best as we can for the day, but when we know, okay, here we go, it's the next day, it's going to happen all again, how do we get recharged, and how do we help to strengthen and keep going and be a positive role model for our kids?
Yeah, a couple thoughts on that. One is remembering how much we're probably doing well, right? Like the times when things are calm, or the times when, they come home and they have their snack and they get to do the things that are predictable, and you make a good dinner and they laugh a little. Like, they get very overwhelmed by these meltdowns, right? And we kind of forget them, but those things add up just as much, if not more, into a kid's brain development. So we have to just remind ourselves that it's not constant chaos. I mean, not usually. I mean, it depends how many kids you have or how many things are going on, but usually there's these moments of really naturalistic learning and connection with kids that And to remember that how important those are, and just keep doing those. And meltdowns do not prevent you from later playing a board game with them or reading to them or hanging out doing a preferred activity. In fact, it's great if you can kind of get over the personal side of it and be like, let's just do the thing we enjoy and have a dance party. Like, you're really teaching well. You're still exhausted, but at least you can remember that's happening. I want to kind of connect that set of thoughts with another comment in there, or a question about what if my partner's not on the same page regarding the shaping of our children, and do I just keep trying to lead by example? And as much as partners can be that source of support, if there is a way to tag team, oh, my kid's starting to get in that mindset of locking into me, and can I leave and my other partner come in? And of course, a lot of the times, no, but if there are opportunities for that, great. And sometimes when we work with parents who might be very much on different pages about things, I think when it comes down to it, parents who are, they still understand that the other person needs support and that they need support sometimes. So if there are even simple mechanisms, even if you don't totally agree on how much homework is important or what they should be doing after school, or whether, how important it is to keep them in soccer when they're freaking out about it, you still know that on an emotional level, you're both dealing with it, right? Dealing with the kids' reactions to it. And so can you provide emotional support to your partners back and forth through tag teaming, through, anything you do to emotionally support each other as a couple, still goes a long way, even if and if you're in such level of disagreement, we have parent coaches, we have couples, we have family therapists, we have all sorts of people. Again, if you have the resources and ability to find people to do this, to help them navigate and negotiate those differences, because they are important. I'm not trying to dismiss them, but it's also, I think even in couples that have pretty different beliefs about what kids can do and different beliefs on those different dimensions that I outlined, at the core of it, they're still a couple, if they are, and together, and they can still provide that emotional support. Different situation if there's two households and but kind of within the same household, I would say that would be one way to think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Going back really quickly to that whole, what do we do when we are just so burnt out, and how do we find the strength to go on? Self-care is a buzzword that has almost become toxic, I think, because when we think of self-care, everyone goes, yes, I'm going to get my nails done. I'm going to go and have a drink. I'm going to take a long bubble bath. And that's not real life sometimes. So, just really focusing on being intentional about finding those small moments where you can recharge, you can focus on gratitude. Maybe it's scrolling on TikTok for 10 minutes before you go to bed, or having a cup of coffee, just finding those small moments where you are being intentional about doing something for yourself. That's one way that I know sometimes I need to keep myself going, is remembering I'm a human with needs as well. I'm not just a parenting robot, right? It's
good reminders, Elizabeth. Good reminders.
My teenager may think I am some sort of task delivering robot sometimes. I saw that somebody else posted a question about just those teenage meltdowns, especially about being separated from the phone. One thing that I'm definitely trying to practice more than I preach is that a teenager's job right now is to formulate their own identity separate from you. And so that's going to mean situations. We actually just tonight, my son's phone died, and you would have thought that the world was ending for sure. So just, remembering he's doing his job right now. He's rebelling. He's telling me how he feels. He's disagreeing with me. And that's really kind of the space that we're living in right now. Be firm and set your boundaries, and hopefully they come out on the other side and eventually, are grateful that you set those boundaries.
I saw, and I know we're getting close on time, right? But I saw one other question in there about this person's tendency to be naturally empathetic. I noticed sometimes that when they're going along that dimension of like nurturance and empathy, sometimes the kid's spiraling more, right? So then they might remove themselves from the situation, and maybe that helps them, but then the parent feels kind of cold and disconnected and wonders how that's being received by the kid. And I would just say, you're right in the thick of a parenting dimension, right? Like that is a very reasonable set of things to be thinking about. And, the fact that you can remove yourself from a situation and have the kid calm down is still a good thing, but you're always playing that balancing act, right? And there maybe there are just other times of the day you can nurture all the heck you want, right? Be there, be connected, read, cuddle, tickle, play, like do all of that when kids are doing basically what they're supposed to be doing. When kids are having meltdowns because they're, refusing to do something, or they're extremely anxious, it doesn't matter why, you're still trying to teach them in a very sort of gentle way, I'm not going to engage in this, right? And not because you're doing something wrong. It's just there's no benefit to engaging in a fight or flight response other than being generally available. And I often tell parents, like, being on the outskirts of this fight or flight mechanism is a great place to be. You're kind of just at the periphery enough to be available if they're needed. But if you ever see someone who's truly in a panic fight or flight situation, you don't want to get that close to them, really, right? There's that fight piece that happens. So being on the outskirts of being available, they know that you're there. It's not coming off as cold and insensitive. It's coming off as whatever, they only probably have that many conscious thoughts about it. It's just being experienced as a sense of a safety net without it being an extra threat. And another thing that comes up all the time, parents have lots of suggestions for kids when they're in emotional meltdowns or close to it. I think 0% of the time they're received, right? I don't think there's a single time I've suggested something to one of my kids when they're in this state that's like, oh yes, brilliant idea. I'm going to take those deep breaths now. It's that backing up and just knowing, they know you're available. And the suggestions can come when they start to come off that, right? Maybe what can we do next time? Or can we have some certain things in place in the house? The suggestions sometimes feel like criticisms, especially when kids are in a hypervigilant state of fight or flight. And that doesn't really help anything. But it's a very natural instinct to be like, try these 18 things and you probably feel better. Maybe not.
Well, thank you. I know we are at 7:02. There's still a lot of people that are on the line. There's still some questions. Do you guys want to take, maybe one or two more? Look at, what's there as far as addressing. I think one of the ones, that I saw too is a constant theme is the kids just not listening. I mean, you're talking to them, you're trying to help them, you're trying to, you want to help them as best, but they're shut down. There's nothing going in. And another one too on consequences. What are consequences that's appropriate for some of these behaviors? So if you guys want to look at that and those that can stay on just for a few more minutes, because I know time is precious, but what are your thoughts on those two areas?
Sure. So on consequences, really a consequence is very relative to the individual. And so one thing that one of my children may perceive as a negative consequence or a punishment, my other one will not care about. So first it's finding what's meaningful to your child, like my 14-year-old, the sun sets and rises on the Xbox. And so I know that that's the consequence that's going to get through to him. His sister doesn't play Xbox, so it doesn't make sense. So make sure the consequence fits the individual first, and then also making sure that it's right-sized to the action. You don't want it to be too minimal or too extreme. Sometimes there's that natural consequence, which I'm a big fan of, but just making sure that it resonates with your child. So just kind of observe and see. Yes. Oh, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think dovetailing off of that, or remembering the other side to it, it's, like the reward side, right? Basic reward consequences. So if you're making sure that your expectation's clear and that when it's met, like you're at least giving praise or at least noticing, or, if not having some kind of point system or whatever in the house. And, my house has had many a point system. They're hard to maintain. That no one's saying that that's the be all end all solution, but it is important to have some form of fashion, clear expectations, and some form of clear positive response when things go the way you expect. It's very natural for us to ride out the positive things and just do our own thing. Things are going well. And when things go wrong, we sort of have a response and consequence. And as much as we can flip that just a little bit to really kind of be in there and highlight and notice and express pride and so forth in times when things are going well, even if it seems minimal. Of course, they should be combing their hair and going, well, they didn't for years and now they are. So let's go on and, notice that in whatever level that's helpful.
Sure.
Yeah. So.
Tiffany, I forgot the first part of that question.
The consequences and then kids listening and shutting down, because I'm sure they think we're just speaking at them versus trying to help them. So how do we get them to want to listen to us, to hear us?
So I think that something that you, Dr. Wolff and I both pointed out was less is more. If your child's already in that headspace and they're already, engaging in that meltdown behavior, we got to write it out and we're going to talk after they've become more rational and calm down. But, really focusing on that beforehand. If I know that I need to get something out of my child, I'm going to first make sure that there's, hey, put your phone down come here, I want to talk to you, or getting close to them, making sure, like I've increased my proximity, I'm looking at them. And so, maybe I need to pause the YouTube that's on the TV for a moment to make sure that they're not just listening to YouTube and ignoring me, right? So setting up their environment and themselves up to make sure that they're more receptive to what I'm saying. And then if they're already upset, I'm going to just say, I'm going to wait until you've calmed down. And then once they've calmed down, then it's time to launch into whatever it was I was trying to say.
Well, thank you guys. Again, I know we're at 7:06. Thank you all on the line. I think one of the biggest things too is to give ourselves grace. It is tough being a parent. It's a tough being a parent of a neurodiverse child. Surround yourself too with people that understand, that can support. As I mentioned in the beginning, it has been life-changing. People that have kids of all ages who I'm like, how do you do this? How do you get through that? We need a support system. And don't be afraid to ask for help. I mean, that's the thing is if you're a single parent, if you're doing whatever the circumstances are, if there are people that you trust that you can say like, can I leave for an hour? Can you come help me? So we're all in this together. And that's the biggest thing is that you're not alone and how we can support each other, how we can, look at situations and circumstances, especially if we're out and there's a stranger and you see a child melting down, just to touch them on and say, hey, is everything okay? Instead of, where kids, people who might have neurodiverse might be judging like, oh, look at that parent. Let's give grace to each other as parents, as humans, and just support and bring more joy and kindness to each other. And so thank you again, Dr. Wolff, Elizabeth, for your time. I truly appreciate this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always, again, welcome anyone who wants to call and chat and discuss, different aspects of what's going on and, whether or not there's sort of, room and availability here in the practice to do that. Like I still think it's very helpful to kind of at least have a listening ear of someone like a psychologist who can think through what would maybe be some good next steps for you, or just to listen. I do a lot of that too. So calls.
All right. Well, thank you all.
Thank you, Tiffany, for putting this on too. We really appreciate it.
All right. You're welcome. Thank you.
All right,
Bye.
everybody.